Today's interview is with Seth Teagle. Seth decided that he wanted to invest in multifamily, so he went all in. He didn't go the usual path of buying single family homes and then scaling up. He went and bought a 50-unit property for his first deal. So really cool story about how that went, what he learned, and what he's doing next. So stick around for all of that. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE Podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review. It really does help me build this platform and continue to pump out great content for you guys. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate in whatever aspect that is, I'd love to get to know you, see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. So go to the link in the description down below, or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com and sign up there and hop on a call and just have a great conversation about real estate. But before all of that, enjoy today's awesome interview with Seth Teagle. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Seth Teagle. Hey Seth, how you doing, man?
Good, doing good.
Cool, man. Well, hey, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you making the time. I know you're a very busy guy, with no doubt about that. But before we kind of jump into the conversation and have a fun conversation about real estate, do you want to give us an idea about your background, what you've been up to, and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, so I have I actually been a fireman for 20 years now. This year's my 20th year. And so that's been my main career. I got into real estate investing probably 8 years ago. I started learning and kind of consuming content and information and trying to really study and learn as much as I could before I dove in. And then, I worked with some different guys and realized that I wanted to get into multifamily, and been in multifamily now for about 3 years, and, just trying to grow and scale and, get better. So,
yeah. How did you get it? How did you join the fire brigades to start off with?
So I got out of high school. I actually grew up in North Dakota, and then I graduated high school and I moved to Florida because, who doesn't want to live in Florida, right? The North Dakota kid, growing up with 60 below winters and tons of snow, I was over it. So I actually had a friend of mine that I grew up with his dad was in the Air Force base or in the Air Force, and the base that he was at, they got transferred to Florida. So I kept in contact with him, and I graduated. I moved down there, and him and I had an apartment together for a while. And I was kind of like, what do I want to do with my life? I wasn't really sure. And so we lived right down the street from a fire department, and just happened to be driving by. And I was like, I had always liked that or that kind of public service, I guess, or public safety, and stopped in and started talking to the guys and realized that it was very much like a athletic sports team. I played sports growing up through high school, and just a camaraderie and the guys, harassing each other and just having a good time. But then also doing a very serious job. It just was very appealing to me. And so I started hanging out around there, and one thing led to another, and here I am 20 years later. So
where are you now? Where do you live now?
So I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I work for the city of Worthington Fire Department here locally. I'm a lieutenant with them. So
how did you go from Florida to Columbus?
So I was down there for about 8 years, and I met my wife, and her dad actually lived up here. He flies planes for NetJets, which is like a private plane company, that I don't know, he's flown Tiger Woods and a bunch of baseball players, actors, whatnot. And they're based out of Columbus. So we came up to visit, and I like the area, I like being in a metro city. Obviously I like OSU football. The Columbus Blue Jackets are here, so I grew up playing hockey in North Dakota, so getting to watch an NHL team was great. And then just being close to, you're close to Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, DC, like all the bigger cities. So we had talked about moving after we had been through, I think, 3 or 4 hurricanes in a short amount of time, and not being from there, I had no ties, and I was like, I'm out of here, So we left and moved up here, and been here now for 12 years. So
wow, no regrets. You don't miss the nice summer, the nice winters in Florida, compared to.
I like ends. Yeah, we only get like 26 inches of snow on average here, so it's not terrible, but you get all the seasons. And then we go back to the beach quite a bit. So, now I can go down there and visit and hang out. And I see some of the guys I used to work with and whatnot. So it's a good time. I don't miss living there with the danger of having a hurricane every hurricane season, but
yeah, that's a real risk around that. Yeah. So where does and when did real estate kind of come into the equation?
when did it? So I probably say like I think it's about 8 years ago. I was just, kind of looking for something to do. I've got a pretty good construction background, just being in the fire service in general. And a friend of mine that I went to college with, when he's in Florida, he became a realtor and then got into investing pretty quickly. And then I had lost contact with him for several years, and then we reconnected. And here I find out he's flipping houses, he's got rentals, he's doing all kinds of stuff. He actually is in. I don't know if he'll probably never see this, but his name is Matt Robinson, and he's got a meetup group in Pensacola, Florida, where he started it, and it's grown now to I don't know how many cities he's in, but he does all kinds of cool stuff. Well, he had sent me a series on house flipping back then, just like via email, like on MP3, so it was a while ago. And I would listen to that in my car, and I just basically he was his system on how he went through like finding deals, flipping them, how did he do it, all the different kinds of financing you can do for those things. And I just ate it up. That, and then Rich Dad Poor Dad, read that book. And I actually a guy had turned me on to Bigger Pockets, and I don't know, either he told me or I heard it like one of the very first podcasts that was like the book to read, so I've read that, and I was like, oh, I kind of get this now, and just kind of went from there. I started working with another gentleman that was flipping houses, and he kind of took me under his wing, and we worked together for a while. I kind of learned from him, like project management, dealing with contractors. But I realized quickly that flipping houses is like a full-time job, and already having a career, it's like, well, I don't know if I got time for that because I got family and whatnot. And so I moved into kind of managing his rental portfolio, and I really started to kind of buy into the buy and hold and the long-term wealth creation it can cause. And but I was always nervous about having like a house that puts out $200-300 a month, $400 a month, and you have two or three of those, your AC goes out, your to replace one can be the $2,000-3,000. Well, your whole profits for that house are gone in that one transaction. Or uh or if you only have one house and that happens, now you're paying out of your pocket, right? Or it's like everybody says, the one tenant moves out, now you're paying the mortgage, and so I really bought into that. That's train of thought. But I was like, how do you, I was again still thinking duplexes, 4 units, whatever. And I just really started honing in on guys doing the bigger stuff, and I switched my focus to that. And then how do I do this? So it's really, I kind of got into just doing syndications, JVs. How can I, if I find a deal, how do I piece this thing together? Every deal is a little bit different. So
Yeah, that's interesting. So how many properties were you managing when you were managing for him?
I think a total of like 20 units. So like I said, he had like some duplexes. He had a 8-unit apartment building. He had what do you have? 1, 2, 3 duplexes, an 8-unit. He had a couple houses. So I mean, and then like I said, he would buy like some that were pretty rough, and then he would put some money into them, but he wouldn't do like what I wanted to do. And I realized that quickly too, right? Is you've got to be the guy buying or the guy in control to really do it. And I'm very big on providing people with a great place to live, understanding the market, your prospect tenant, not over correcting. If you go in, not every apartment needs granite, not every apartment needs stainless steel, not every, you kind of have to understand where you're buying, and then fix it to where, you're going to get the type of tenant you want, but not overdo it to where you're not going to get your return. That's always the big thing when I make decisions is how long will it take for me to get my money back, on whatever it is. So
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you're managing these properties and he's not fixing them up to what you expect, right? You're the one dealing with the headaches, right? If he's not.
Well, yeah, and then I'd show them, and these people are like, "Oh, this is gross," or "Oh, this isn't what you said it was," and I have no say in it, or like people would call and complain about something, and they're like, "I want this fixed," and I'd call them and say, "Hey, we need to fix this water heater, or we need to do this," and just put a patch on it, like I'm not paying for that. And so that really started to bother me after a while, where I'm like, look, this is not what I want to do. If I was going to work for somebody, I want to work for somebody like myself who, you know, that takes care of the people that live there, and makes it, because you want to take care of the property. It's only helping you in the long run. So
yeah, for sure. But I'm sure that was an invaluable experience, though, right? And learning, like, so,
oh, absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
both in the flipping business, actually, and dealing, like you said, project management, dealing with contractors,
Yep.
understanding how that works, and then learning the property management. It was almost a great education, right? Like a university degree almost in
Oh yeah.
in real estate, right? Doing both those jobs.
Yeah, it helped me cut my teeth too, and like get the butterflies out, right? Because I mean, the first time I had to go collect rent from somebody or had to sign a lease, I mean, I was like terrified, right? And so it was, well, what do you do? What do you say? And so it helped me kind of work through that on somebody else's dime, because I didn't own the houses, and if they said no, okay, move on percent or whatnot. So really, it made me realize, the value in multifamily, but it also made me realize that I don't want to be a property manager. Like, if I was going to ever go vertical and integrate property management into what I'm doing, I would have to have somebody that's what they're hired to do that. I don't want to be the guy, that's just not my skill set.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
can do it, but I don't want to, right? I need to be able to
Yeah,
talk to investors, that kind of thing. So
that's the good thing about real estate, right? You can choose what you want to do, right? To some extent, you just choose the stuff that you like to do and enjoy to do, and then hire people to do the other stuff. That's what's really. So, what was your first property then? What was you were saying before we started recording that you never bought a single family rental, right? You went straight into multi-family.
Yeah. So
awesome. I love that.
So about 2.5 years ago, I bought a 50 unit, and that was the first big one that I did. Like I said, I really, well, I guess, that was I guess that was my thought, was I only can do the first one right one time, right? It has to be good. It has to be a home run. At least that's what Matt would always say on his stuff. Yeah, like you can get base hits on a single family and it'd be fine, but if you don't get a home run in your first big deal, you can really put yourself in a bad spot. So I had my stepdad, he'd always had rentals like for 30 years, but he was a mom and pop owner, um, you know, fixed everything, did all facets of it. And he still has a mobile home park and I think like a 10 unit apartment building. So I helped him with those kinds of things. But, I really sold him on the idea of like, look, we can take your net worth and grow it massively if you'll invest with me. And so we both put our money in together and we were able to buy this 50 unit. And then I just ran the whole thing. So I, I, uh, I hired a property management company like pretty early on because the takeover was gonna be pretty big, because it was a definite like C-class value add. But the construction management and the rehabbing and all that, I managed all that stuff myself. And so I had them leasing the property, and but I mean, I managed them very well because I knew that this was like my one chance to really make it, and it performed well. And I had capital investors that were not equity holders, but they did some balloon notes and different things, and just did basic loans, because I didn't want to get into a syndication at that time. I didn't want to be giving away any of it. I needed it to try to like springboard into something bigger. And it was tough to get that first one done, when you haven't had you've had a ton of experience. But I'd gone to several different lenders and they wouldn't touch you. Some of the local ones that I'd had relationships with, because it was over $1 million, they didn't want to do it. And then some of them were like, oh, your experience is great, but you've never owned an apartment complex. So that was a pretty big hurdle that I had to get over. But it got the deal done, and it was an amazing deal, and we did great. So.
But see, 50 units, right? That's a
I know,
large
right?
number, right, for the first deal.
Hey, you don't know what you don't know. I was like, hey, what can we get with the most of our money? Well, hey, this one's for sale. Yeah, the numbers look good according to all the stuff. Like I said, all the homework I had done and all the learning, I put it to use. I'm like, this looks great, and it was like I said, it was quite the learning experience. Like, would I tell people that that's what they should do? Probably not. For the first one, but I was just like, I knew where I wanted to go, and I was like, how was the quickest way to get from A to B? And this was it. So I had he was I consider him a mentor, but he probably wouldn't even remember who I am. But he's out of Cleveland. His name's Jack Petrick. He was a fireman for Strongsville, Ohio, and he retired, and he's full-time multifamily. I think he's got about 700 or 800 units now. Wow. But we talked, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 times in the process, working up to the actual close of the deal. And so that really helped out a lot. He was just giving me some good insights on stuff, make sure I was going down the right path. And then when what I didn't expect was when we closed and we started kind of like laying the law down, they already had, I think they had 4 vacant units when we took over. So the day of takeover, we're like, okay, we only got 4 units. Like that won't be too bad. Well, then when we came around, when I came around with the property manager and we were handing out like the new rules and regulations of the complex, like the next day we had 12 people move out.
Yeah.
So I called him and I'm like, what do I, what's going, he's like, oh, you should have expected that. He's like, how much capital do you have to, for that? I'm like 50 grand, and he's like, oh, that's not nearly enough. So I hit the ground running, trying to work, find investors that wanted to invest in working capital so we could just keep pushing things forward. And luckily, like I said, I was blessed to have all the pieces and parts come together and raised a good amount of money and got it done. So
for people who don't know, right, and especially on value add properties, right, the reason a lot of these value add properties are that is because the previous owner hasn't taken care of them and
right.
hasn't always put in the best tenants, and these are tenants that usually are not very well qualified, right? They haven't done the background checks. They don't 3 times the income or 3.5 times the income, whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
They usually don't meet that. So people don't know, why would 12? When you guys go around trying, like you said, laying down the law, why would 12 tenants move out of their units?
Well, some of it was because they said that they weren't going to pay. They didn't want to be told what to do. Like they had a on-site guy there, but he was like a local guy, but he was just kind of a warm body there, and so it was just mayhem all over the place. They had, like you said, a lot of there was drugs, there's people that would vandalize. There was so it was even though I thought I did a solid due diligence, right? It wasn't again, being you don't know what you don't know, right? So I didn't do a lease. I did a lease audit, but I didn't do like now I have a forensic accountant that will go through and he'll pull a sample of the leases and he'll basically do background checks on these people as best he can, and he'll be able to find out whether or not they've ever had evictions. Like if you have 4 people living there out of 50 or 5 people out of 50, and you look into their background and they've got, he'll go to like the clerk of courts and he can find out how many evictions they've had. Well, they've had 2, 3, 4 evictions. You can tell, like, if they already have that many people there, then the rest of them, what are you going to find? So it just kind of gets you better. One thing that Jack had always said was like, he will get, once he gets the leases, he'll call up the police department, the fire department, talk to them like, hey, you guys go to this building for runs. If where people, I say runs, but where people call 911, right? How often is the police out here? How often is the fire department out here? Or the medics? How are they there for drug overdoses? What kind of calls are they being called there for? And then, he would research all the people that were on the leases through the local court system and find out what the records were like. So, something like that I didn't do because I didn't know to do it on my first deal. And now that's what we do. So, I mean, things like that you can implement, but, it was just, that was that kind of environment, right? It was like all the gigs up. There was people that were there that were family members of the guy running the place. They had signed leases. They had, so some people will call it putting heads on beds, but they, I had a lease for it, right? But they had 8 months. Well, had I used a forensic accountant, somebody that's a professional and can find those things, I would have known that. But I looked at the rent roll, I looked at the T12, I looked at the leases. I'm like, yeah, everything looks like it adds up, great. And then once I got there, they realized, oh man, we've been caught. This guy's going to make us pay. Then a bunch of people left. So
yeah, that happens a lot of times, right? When you take over a new property, a lot of tenants tend to leave because they know there's a new sheriff in town, right? And they don't always want to follow by the rules, and they might not be the tenants that people want to stay as well. So they see the writing on the wall, I think. So they just
and and like I said, now, looking back, it's the best thing that can happen, right? Because now you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on evictions. I mean, I've done cash for keys and, I've done other stuff with people, but yeah, I mean, when they just up and leave, it sounds terrible, like, oh, they broke the lease, but sometimes it's the best thing that can happen because now I get the unit back the next day and we can just go ahead and start renovating it or doing what we want to with it. And so it just, it was, like I said, it was scary the first time I had it happened to me because I wasn't expecting that many people to leave. I thought some would, but not that many, and so, but luckily enough, it cash flowed enough day one to where we were able to cover all of our bills, all our debt. I mean, it wasn't like I was buying it on that skinny of a margin, so we were doing good. But like I said, had I not had that the reserves and the capital to knock this stuff out. I mean, we knocked out 12 pretty quickly and got them re-rented, and well, then we were doing great. And since then, I mean, we've grown the NOI on this property by almost double. So
Wow.
it's great. I mean, it's been you know, in the long run, it was great, but it was definitely a lot of scary stuff. And I mean, and again, I think part of it is my background. I have good construction background. I've ran contractors. You know, all the experiences I had leading up to that purchase. Had I not had any of those, I don't know what I'd have done.
Yeah. Well, looking back now, right, and now you say you have a forensic accountant that goes through it. Had some, you know, had the forensic accountant gone through it, and you'd seen like all the issues that they were probably there with the tenants, would you have done anything differently? Would you have pulled
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, so what I would have done, or what we would do now, is I'd go back to the seller and show them the proof that says, "Hey, look, you know, this is what you're telling me you're getting, but here's the proof that you're not getting that." Uh, and what we request now, I mean, he has a whole list. You know, we get bank statements, we get tax returns, we get all this documentation to be able to prove, you know, because anybody can fix a P&L, or anybody can fix a rent roll, or you know, they can doctor those things to show what they want them to. But if you can't prove that the money's actually going into the account, or you can't prove like where it's going, that it's actually coming in, then what we usually will do is ask them to put money in, you know, I don't know, 50 grand, whatever we think the difference is, into escrow for the first couple months. And it might just sit there. And so if we get there and everything checks out, they get the money back. But if we get there and it doesn't check out, and we have that happen, well, then it's considered part of, you know, in our contract is like damages, basically, where we would get to assume that money then.
That's
And
mad.
sometimes we do it, like I said, if you have a seller that doesn't want, like instead, a big red flag for me is if we request these items and the seller's like, "Oh no, I'm not giving you that. I gave you a rent roll, I gave you a T12, that's all you're getting." Well, you know, then one or two things are going to happen. You're going to either escrow some money, or the deal's done. You know what I mean? Because there's too many shady people out there that you know, and again, you get into a bad deal like that, and it can blow you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when you're talking, you know, several $1 million deals, it can really knock you back down if you get into the wrong one.
And you're talking during due diligence period now, right? About if they won't release any more information outside of the T12.
Yeah, like in that time, right? I mean, so you know, you know, I'm sure you have more listeners than just multifamily, but you know, when we go through and we do our due diligence, you know, we basically base the what we agree to on the price off of what they're telling us, and either if it's on, you know, I shouldn't say on market, but if the broker has it, he sends us the OM, we go through all that stuff, and then we do our analysis of the property, the area, everything, and we base our price off of our underwriting. But yeah, like if we get in there and we find out that there's some major issue, then that's usually, like I said, that's where we'll start going. Or if it ends up, you know, we get in there and there's a bunch of deferred maintenance that we didn't know about, and you're talking, you know, $100,000-$200,000 worth of plumbing or infrastructure stuff that wasn't told to us in the beginning, then you know, then you usually end up retrading these deals, and you know, there's all kinds of ways to do it. But
Yeah. Yeah. But going back to that first deal again, like, so it's a 50-unit deal. What was the purchase price on it, and how did you
uh,
find?
yeah, so I found it in a tertiary market of Columbus, Ohio. Like I said, that first one was like, you know, this is how much money I have. Where can I get the most doors for my dollars? You know, and so I went out a little bit farther than most people would, like, you know, especially if you're like out of state buyer or whatnot. Because I'm local, I know the area. I wasn't too worried about it. You know, half the market was renters, and so I was able to buy that property for 1.7 million is what we paid for it. So yeah, yeah, he was asking, I think, like 2.2, and I was like, that, no way. And so we kind of went back and forth for a while, and then I came in at like 1.5, and you know, we just went back and forth and settled at 1.7. So I felt that was a fair price for the cap rate that we were thinking out there, and the cost per door, that wasn't bad at all.
Yeah. Well, how did you find it?
It was kind of, it was through a friend that knew this guy was like looking to sell. He's a pretty savvy guy, the seller, and he was just he's just got money. He has a construction company, so he's got money that he just puts into properties, which is partially why it was a property with deferred maintenance, because he never goes there. You know, I mean, he hadn't been there in 2 or 3 years. He has a property manager that works directly for him, and then that guy talks to the guy down there, and they don't really ever go there. So you know, nobody really knew how bad it was or what was deferred, and so that helped us on our retrade. But yeah, I mean, that was found it basically through word of mouth.
Mm.
You know, I think he had been discussing putting it on like the MLS, which I don't know why he wouldn't just take it to a broker. Took it to a realtor. Is what he was looking at doing, and luckily I got to him before that happened. and we just settled it that way off market.
Mm. Yeah, that can be a good opportunity a lot of times, right? Is when they go to a residential realtor to list their property, because
Yeah, because a lot of they don't know. They don't even know what to do with that. They're just trying to find anybody and everybody that'll even look at something that big.
yeah, exactly. So you said initially he was looking for 2.4 million.
Yeah.
So how do you, 1.7 from 2.4, right, is is nearly one third of the initial asking price in terms of reduction, right? How were you able to get there? How did you negotiate that down so much?
So when we did our initial like showing of the property or our walkthrough, when we went down there, I had a couple of guys with me. I had a contractor with me that I knew, I trusted. And so we walked, I think, a sampling of like 5 units, and just going within those units and knowing like what we would have to do to get it to what we wanted. Um, and then just looking at the outside of the property, and then, you could just tell it was deferred, right? No one was giving love to this property. It was just kind of sitting there, and it really felt like, and it came to be that they were, if you showed up and you had an ID and you had like a Section 8 voucher or whatever, we'll take you. And that's, so once I just, I kind of put together a calculation in my head, and then with the contractor, we put together like, here's what it would cost to do what we want to do. So we've made our offer based off of that. I mean, we knew there was going to be a bunch of upside because it was just ran poorly, and their expenses were through the roof. And, they weren't doing any kind of water conservation. They weren't billing back utilities. They were paying sewer and water still. So there were some massive things we could do right off, within the first 6 months to reduce those expenses. So I knew the NOI was going to go up through the roof. And so, I was confident that I would have paid more for it, but I think he needed the cash for another property, another deal he was doing. And so he was just, I think he had like a number in his mind of like what he wanted to get out of it cash wise. And as long as he got that, he was fine with it. So, we went back and forth twice, and then we met at 1.7. So, the first, he had it, like I said, 2.4, I offered 1.6, and he came down to like 1.9. That was the next. So I knew, man, he just dropped that much. Like,
Yeah,
he wants to get rid of it,
yeah.
So,
And then, so there wasn't a broker or a realtor involved in the deal at all. You guys just did it between the two of you.
yeah. I mean, I had a friend of mine, like I said, the friend of mine was a realtor. He just kind of, he kind of made sure that everything was good to go, but he didn't take a commission on it or anything. It was more of a favor to me, as far as like the contract goes and whatnot. Because at that time I wouldn't have been comfortable, writing my own contract and whatnot. And I have an attorney that does it now, but back then he just, he kind of put that together and sent it over, and we both signed it, and everybody was good with it. So
Yeah, and you said on this one you were looking to buy as many doors as you could, right? For the money that you had.
well, yeah, and to spread out the risk, you know what I mean? That was the big thing. I thought was, if I can get more, the more doors I can get, the less risk overall. Like I said, to have 4 already vacant and then 12 people move out, I was still able to cover all my bills, all the debt. You know what I mean? And that's the magic of multifamily, is you have that in like I said, in anything else, and money's coming out of your pocket or out of your profits. And so, that was the great thing with this property, was it's cash flowed enough still to be able to cover that.
Mm. But then you said there was deferred maintenance, the units needed work. Did you
Yeah.
have that capital ready to go for the renovations, for the deferred maintenance?
You'd think I would, wouldn't you? But
So
again, I didn't.
plan to do it out the cash flow.
Well, yes, and I had about 25 grand like that I had put to the side. But again, I mean, now I look back, I'm like, oh my lord, what was I thinking? But at the time, I thought, oh, that should be enough to just slowly do it. And I was thinking, do it there. They only had 4 vacants, right? So we cleaned up 4. I had bids from some local guys that I knew that were, they were willing to do all the renovations for like $2,500. And I'm like, that's nothing. So I kind of had that mapped out. And like I said, so when 12 people left, I was like, about had a heart attack. But yeah, so I realized, especially when I heard it in Jack's voice, when I called him and I said, hey, the first rent, payments came in, and it was like 7,000 less than what they had told me they were getting. And he's like, oh man, he's like, again, how much you got, how much capital you have? And I was like, well, here's what I got. And here's what I think I have, coming. And he's like, that's not enough. He's like, you need to get more. So that was it. Like I said, I mean, it's a miracle that like I said, I had the right relationships and was led to the right people, and they believed in me. They bought into what I was doing and the excitement I had and the confidence that I had. Little did they know that I was shaking in my boots, after I walked away. I'm like, holy cow, but yeah, man, the money started coming in, and I said I raised probably close to 200,000,
Wow.
and it was all, I mean, again, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, I don't even, that's probably not legal. It's probably, I mean, as far as like SEC compliant, because it's considered passive investing if you're doing it that way. But my attorney was like, just, if you have them do balloon notes, like just do like a loan, you'll be fine. And so I look back now and I'm like, man, I probably should check, because he's not an SEC attorney. So I'm like, I probably should have checked with an SEC attorney, but I didn't know any better, and so many guys I knew were doing JVs, and they, the other guy wasn't involved, right? Which that technically makes it a joint venture when you both are actively involved in some form or facet. I had all kinds of guys around me that were doing not that big of a deal, but deals like that where they would get money from like their dad or a family member or a friend or, whatever. And that person would invest, but they'd never set foot on the property. So I didn't realize that, you could get yourself in trouble like that back then. So, but yeah, that's really it. I mean, I would do, and it wasn't all at once. I mean, it was like 50,000 here, and I'd use that up, and I'd start getting low, and another person was brought into my life that was like, hey, I've been looking to get into real estate. Some of them, like one gentleman that was an older guy that his back was bad. He'd worked like on the railroad for his whole career, always wanted to get into real estate, but now he can't. And so and I was introduced to him through another friend. And so we talked and had dinner, and he's like, well, how much do you need? I kind of was like, well, I never want to ever scare anybody and be like, I need $200,000, so like whatever you're comfortable doing, I'll offer you 10% interest, and we'll do a, 12 to 24 months and no prepayment penalty, but I guarantee you at least a year of interest. And so, he wrote the check the next day, and that was the end, that was it. So,
Wow. So then so if there's a 12-month balloon, how were you paying these guys off? And did you just know that you needed to refinance at that point?
yeah, I knew I needed to refi. And so that was the race, right? I mean, it was like, we got to get this thing done and in shape and cleaned up. And we did it in 13 months. And it was like, it was crazy. But it was what I needed to do to, one, get the first, full cycle on a deal, to make proof of concept, really, to get a track record, to have some street credibility, because it's completely changed now. Again, my confidence level, knowledge, when I go to a lender, or I go to talk to anybody, and they want to know, oh, have you gone full circle? Yes, I have. It's just a big deal. It's very hard, I think, for some people that have never done it, to get over those hurdles. But you can do it. There's a way. I mean, what's great about it is, it's, I don't know. They always talk about that analysis paralysis, and had I analyzed this thing to death, and I really had I known enough, I probably would have known enough to know better to do it. Right. But by doing it, it changed my life. So, that's the big thing. And it was great. Yeah. We refied, November. I had to hold it for a year because to complete the year, because a lot of lenders don't, you haven't seasoned it enough on these big ones, and you haven't really given a proof of concept on your new T12. And I held it for 13 months, and a loan broker friend of mine was able to get me refied, and I got a really, really great interest rate, pulled out a ton of capital, paid everybody back, made a lot of money, so I could do another deal, a bigger deal, nicer deal, better market. And we kept that one, and that's it. My payment on the property only went up $500, and we pulled out probably $750,000.
Wow. What
We had to keep 25% in the deal, right? So I didn't get it all back out. I wish I would have, but I was able to pay everybody back, and then have a really nice chunk of money left to go do something else with. So,
what would you have done if you weren't able to refinance at that point?
Well, that's kind of why I had in those contracts, I had built in 12 to 24 months, because when I was talking with different guys, and just like I said, just listening to different guys that are doing it, they always would say, if you get a bridge loan, it's usually 18 to 24 months on a bridge. Some guys will do it for 3 years, like interest only, but but again, it takes it back to, I didn't have a property that size under my belt, so I went to bridge lenders, and they wouldn't do it because I didn't have the 24 unit or the 30 unit or whatever prior to that, and luckily I was able to find a lender that keeps the loan on their own books. And because of that, they were able to, like, they can take loans that don't fit into a nice box and make them work, because they keep them, they're not selling them off, or they're not, doing whatever with them that they do. But yeah, so it worked out.
How many lenders did you have to speak to before you found that one?
5, I think. I went through 4 and they wasted my time. And I had loan guys that I had dealt with before on just other stuff, or friends of mine, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we can do it." And it went all the way up. They had me on the hook for 2-3 weeks, and then it went to the credit committee, and the credit committee was like, "Look, you look great. Your credit's great. You got liquidity. Everything looked good, but and the property looks great, right? We get your vision. We know what you're going to do. We got your pro forma, like all that kind of stuff." But they're like, the hurdle they couldn't get over was either, one of them was the $1 million. And 3 of them were like, look, it's just, they didn't want to take the risk, right? It was too risky for them to give that much money to a guy who had never done a deal that big. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even, like I said, that didn't even register in my mind when I went and sat down with them. I had my pamphlet ready. I'd done all of my, marketing material, like for the lender, all the stuff they talk to you about doing before you have a relationship with anybody or before you have any credibility. And, you kind of like bluff your way through it. Right. And so, like I said, it was a great learning experience, but that's why now I use a loan broker. I give it to Sean and he just calls me back and was like, "Hey, you got these 5 options. Which one do you want to do and why?" And that's how we do it now. So.
Yeah. And the good thing about a broker, had you used the broker on the first one as well, is they would have probably found you someone quicker. Right. And then even if, what I like about the idea about using a broker as well is if something goes wrong, sometimes lenders pull out, they can scramble and find someone else, right, to do that loan for you.
Right. Well, and then, like I said, on this refinance, he had to really sell it because he had gone through a lot of people that they wanted me to hold it for like another 6 months, or they wanted me to, and I'm like, look, I gotta get this thing done. Right. Cause I had one guy that I was paying, he's pretty much a hard money lender. He was a friend of mine that he's become a friend that he had lent on a lot of the guy I had worked for, introduced us, and he had done he's a lender for guys that do single family flips and whatnot. So he's like, there was penalties, like big penalties built into his contract. If I went over 12 months, it was $5,000. Mm-hmm. That was the one day over, and so I was really pushing hard because I knew that he was gonna really hammer me if I didn't get it done. So that was something that was great with Sean, was that he was able to find the person through his relationships that would refi me at a loan to value in the middle of COVID, where my own lender that I was with was only offering me loan to cost at a higher interest rate. Well, that wouldn't have helped me, right? It would have gotten me to pay back all my capital investors, but the whole point is to go buy something else, to grow and expand. And so it would have just completely shut me down. And I was like, well, I can't do that. So luckily he was, utilizing that relationship I had with him really, really helped out in that situation. So.
Yeah. How many properties do you own now?
So I've got 90 units now on my own. I got basically two complexes, but I'm in, so through this, I met another fireman. He works for a different department here in Columbus, and he's like a real estate guru as well. He's on his like side job, because firemen, we work 24 hours on and we have 2 days off. So I've got time to like do other stuff. And his side was being a commercial agent. So he works for like a boutique brokerage here in Columbus, but he was really savvy with the commercial, like dealing with the brokers, underwriting, putting contracts together, but the biggest thing he had ever bought at that time was, 12 unit apartment building, but he had done a lot of fix and flips and burrs and just, they had kind of scaled up, his family moved, I don't even know how many times now, they moved like 9 times in X amount of years. But, even like on his personal residence, he paid, I think 450,000 for it or something, somewhere around the 400 mark. And then they fixed it up and he redid all of it. And it just, I think it reappraised for like 1.1 million. So he's super successful on that side, right? But what he was lacking again was doing a big deal. I needed somebody that could do what he does, and he needed somebody that could do what I do. And we're both, our standards of quality that we want to put up for units, we're, operating with integrity, being trustworthy, just having all those quality things that we both wanted. I want to be able, I'm still kind of like that guy that wants to be able to shake your hand and my word is my bond kind of thing. And they can get you burnt, but that's just how we operate. It's not, we don't just shake people's hands on deals, you know what I mean? But, if I tell you, hey, this is how it's going to go down, that's how it's going to go down on my end. And that's super important to me in business and just dealing with, again, trust. So we hooked up and we were looking at a couple different deals. We had the ability to do some bigger stuff now because he had his own capital. I had my capital now to work with. So we were looking at 137 unit together, and it ended up falling apart. And so we were looking for other ones, and we ended up connecting with a group out of Utah, and they were looking in Columbus, but didn't have anybody there local. But they had the financial backing to assume loans, to do agency debt, some of those big ticket things that we didn't have, but we had what they needed, right? We had all the contractor construction, contacts. We had knowledge of the area. We're both, pretty savvy at this point in time on what we're doing, and we're not new uh, to how these things go. And like I said, he's like a master negotiator, does underwriter. I mean, Tim's great, so it was just a great pairing. And so those guys really opened up the doors for us, and we for them. And so it's been, right now that's kind of where we're at with things, is looking for deals. We got 325 under contract right now. The set to close in the first quarter of this year, which is great. And we're just still looking for more stuff. So it's really kind of blowing up, right? But all the stuff that I learned through years of kind of preparation, and then hitting a home run deal, and then buying another one, and then meeting these guys, it really just kind of it made it work. So
Yeah, yeah. So then after the first one, you bought 40 units, I'm guessing.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
So talk about that deal.
So that one was actually from the same seller that I bought the other one from. I had stayed in contact with him because I knew his portfolio was like 400 units, and I thought, well, here you go. Here's my off market guy right here. So I would send him text messages and whatnot, like throughout the year. And he was like, "Oh, I'm not looking to sell anything, not right now, but if it comes down to it, I'll call you." Well, then he called me and was like, "Hey, I'm looking at getting rid of the other apartment complex I have down there in the same area." He's like, "Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Well, sure, I'll take a look at it." So he sent me all the information on it. It's the same thing, right? He's removed. They have the same local guy that was at the other one, so I already know what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
I looked at their rent rolls. I know, I backed out all the stuff that I would write as capex, but he puts it in his P&L, so it makes his NOI look lower. So it gives you bigger negotiating power. And so we just, like I said, we ended up just doing kind of like I wouldn't say back of the napkin contract, but at that time I just went over to his office and we met and discussed that plus a bunch of other opportunities and signed a contract right there that I had with me, and that was that. So
Wow. So what was the purchase price on that one?
it was 1.6 for that. They were but not, same a little bit same area closer to the city, and it was but they were nicer, like nicer condition, weren't as like deferred maintenance and whatnot, but it's definitely a management play because the property manager that I have now, he's gonna he actually wants to get in on the deal. So he put in 20, what did he put in? He put in enough to get the loan done because I had capital tied up in other deals, and so then I gave him 20% of the deal and I've got 80. So,
Oh,
and
nice.
then he manages it, right? So he gave me a break on the management. So I had negotiated down to 6% for him before, which was, he was managing it cheaper than they were paying this guy that was terrible. And then when we brought in this other deal, I said, look, now you're going to be part owner. Let's get this management thing. You don't want to be paying yourself that much either, right? So we went down even a little bit more, and so it's been good. But it frees me up because I trust him, and now, like I said, I brought him in, and he's a part of the deal. It's allowed me now to focus on these bigger projects that we have going on, and I don't have to. I can trust that this guy's not going to take advantage of me because if it fails, he fails. I mean, he's losing money too. So
Yeah, yeah. So the 326 unit deal, you said you guys were looking for a while. Do you guys have any trouble getting credibility with brokers and lenders? Obviously buying 50 and 40 units is, challenging in itself, right? But now going to 326 units, right? That's no joke. Do you have any issues with that whatsoever?
no, I mean, so part of it is, so it's actually three different complexes. It's a 70, a 79, and 180. Okay, so that may or may not make a difference, but the big thing was, again, part of these, partnering with these other guys that, they have the financial backing. One of them has a massive portfolio. I think it's worth $90 million. So, there's all kinds of levels of guys within the group and their experience level, right? I mean, like Tim doesn't have a huge portfolio of apartments, but what he brings to the table is, very, very good underwriting, contract negotiation. I bring what, skill sets that I bring. And then these other guys have, they've been in the real estate investing game for a long time. They're full-time in it. And then, like I said, the other Tim on our team, he's been doing it since he was like 18. So he's got a massive portfolio. His dad was an investor. And so I know he talked about how, like at the dinner table, he remembered talking about cap rates and leasing and renters and, just all that kind of stuff when he was a kid. So he kind of grew up in it. And he does ground up construction. He does, what is it? Ground up, new construction. He does new construction. He does, commercial stuff. He does malls. He does all kinds of stuff. So it's not just multifamily for him, but, and then he LPs and other people's deals. He syndicated a bunch of stuff. So, it's when you come with that good of a team, I haven't seen it yet. Nobody's batted an eye when we come talking and when they look at our website and they're like, oh, okay, these guys look legit. And so, it's been fine. Nice. But yeah, if I went by myself and said, hey, I want to take down a 300 unit deal, especially right now with COVID and how tight the lending terms are, no way, right? That would just be foolish. So, but yeah, like I said, that's part of part of the mindset that I had to get over as well is, I want to own every percent of this. That was something that I, in the very, very beginning years ago, I struggled with, and then as I learned, I was able to kind of like let that go and say, look, explain to my wife, right? If we get a $10 million deal and I only own 10% of it, that's still $1 million, and that's just day one at closing. That doesn't mean, when we do all the rehabbing and the value add and then we sell it, 5 years later at a better cap rate, that might be 3 million, you just never know what it's going to do. But, if you're really trying to create generational wealth and increase your net worth, you have to do those things. Like I like, I've done his mastermind and he's doing the commercial empire on, I think next week, but Tim Brotz, has got tons of units and he's just one of a bunch of guys that are crushing it and doing, all these syndications. And I was always like, the syndicators, they got 1,000 doors, but they only own like 10% of that, and so it initially was kind of like, well, I kind of laughed at it, but then it was like, what, like if you really want to grow and your net worth become, truly have generational wealth, there's a time and a place for that, right? So if you can get into to $5-10 million deals and only own 10% of that, of each one of those, doesn't sound like a lot until you start adding that up, and that's really like, he does a ton of that stuff. I know he's talked about he'll JV with somebody or he'll just sign on the loan and they'll give him 25% of the deal. And he never even like goes there, never sees it, doesn't manage it, doesn't do anything. And he gets 25% of that deal. How awesome is that? Right. And to get to that level to where you can do that, that's great. So.
Yeah. So I know you guys are under contract, so I think you can talk about it a little bit, right? What's the story on the 325 unit? What's the opportunity there?
So there's one of them's a 70 unit that's C class that's just going to require, full, reno of the units and whatnot. And then it's really it's terribly mismanaged to the point where the owners are out of money. And so they just need to get rid of it. So they had it appraised, I think a year and a half ago for like 400,000 or 500,000, what we're getting it for, but they just need to get rid of it. The other one that we got, it was kind of funny because like we found one and went into contract and all of a sudden these other two just showed up from different brokers that said, hey, you guys will close these things. Like here, take a look at them. And so the other one was like 8 blocks up from those 3 buildings. And it's like a full gut rehab. So it's going to be like almost, I wouldn't call it a flip because we're going to hold it for a while just to get the T12 stabilized and be able to present it as a well-functioning apartment complex. But it's going to be like window sidings, doors, new roofs, all new plumbing and everything on the inside as well. So there's that's part of it. And then the 180 unit is about a half an hour north of Columbus. And it's in a market again that I know well, but the deal just rocks. We're getting it from some guys that I know the group, they buy campus housing and they've got about 1,000 units around OSU. And one of them kind of ventured out and bought an apartment complex and they've had it for 4 or 5 years. And it sounds like they kind of got into a fight or something and they just want to get rid of it. So, it's by far the biggest purchase at this point that I've been a part of. But, again, you start getting into those bigger deals, really you're changing the NOI at that point, it can have some massive explosion of your price and what the value is. So it's great.
Yeah. Well, Talk about the one that needs a complete gut job. That one sounds really interesting to me. Like,
Yeah, so
how are you guys financing that? Are you doing a bridge loan on that?
yeah, so that one will probably be a bridge. We've actually talked to Chris Litzler he's a Marcus and Millichap broker out of Cleveland. So he does a lot of Tim Brotz's loans. He does some other guys' loans up there that I know that have quite a bit of property. And so I reached out to him, and he's been great to work with. And so that's probably how we're going to do it right now. Just do like a 2-3 year interest only loan, and then refighting agency debt once we get done. But yeah, I think it's 50% occupied right now. The owners are so out of money that they boarded up windows in some of the buildings and like shut them down. And then the ones that are occupied, I haven't even been in them yet because the seller wouldn't let us in unless we had it in contract. So we walked to the property, and we just, at this point we can just write off, we just say, what's our cost per door, and put that into the underwriting. Like, I don't necessarily need to see the unit to know it's junk. We're going to redo everything. But the broker said that they're out of money to where they can't even do carpet, so they're painting the subfloor, and that's what people are walking on and living on. I'm like, man, that's terrible. So the plan right now would be to take it over and get as many like if everybody's month to month, let's say, we would just flush them all out, shut it down, and just bring in the construction company and just redo everything in like 6 months or less, and then reopen it completely, rebranded and new. So that would be ideal, because it's much easier to work on this stuff without having to dance around people and vehicles and whatnot. But if we can't do that, like, let's say there's half the people are on leases, then legally, you can't force them out. So then we would just have to go, kind of like building by building, or doing like 2 or 3 buildings at a time. But we can, we might not be able to get them out, but we can get them all in like 1 or 2 buildings.
Mm. And, are you raising money for this, or is the group out of Utah financing?
No, so we are going to raise money. We haven't determined yet through our attorney. I mean, I'm like 98% sure we're going to do a C offering, so it will get advertised. It will be blasted, through our website, through Tate Seamer, which is one of the guys in the group. He's got a podcast. It'll get put out on that. Any avenue, Facebook, that we can, and then just other relationships that we all have already with other accredited investors. So
yeah. What kind of returns do you expect on something like that, do you think?
Right now it's looking like 17% IRR is what we're looking at, and like on the overall, the 180 unit deal, that's a guaranteed is what we're looking at. I mean, we've underwritten it for like 4 different angles, and we've had other people look at it, and they're all like, yeah, this will be a really good deal. The total like rehab, I think we've looked at doing like a 7 and 7. So we'll offer like a 7% guaranteed, and then 7 at the end. So you'd get like 14 total, but you get a 7 preferred. Like I said, it may be all pushed to the end. Like once we do the refi, you get it all at one time, right? So it'd be a little delayed, but you're going to get 14% on your money. That's that's like hard money, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty good. So I think that's kind of what we've been discussing right now. And I think the raise for that is like the first 7 units is like $1.5 million. The 79, the full gut, is maybe closer to 2, I think 2 or 3. And then the bigger one's quite a bit more. It's like 4 million, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, like I said, it's kind of, I mean, obviously if somebody's interested, they can get a hold of me. And once we say, hey, we're doing a C offering, we'll blast out there to everybody, and have, obviously I don't have everything in front of me right at the moment, but that's I mean, there's definitely gonna be some good opportunity. Columbus is a great market. It's, I mean, one of the hottest in the country. So, again, that's part of the value of having local guys on your team, because we know a lot of these brokers, like one of them, that brought us a deal, he lives about 5 minutes from me. So I've known him for a while, and they know Tim and I, and we have a good reputation. So they have no problem sending us stuff. And obviously if they see we're closing on deals, they'll just keep more. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. This has been really interesting. I love I love that you started with 50 units, man. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I know that I laugh about it now, but it could have went bad, right? At any moment, my wife and I always joke about it. We're like, like now and while it was happening, it was just like how, she's like, I just can't believe it, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if luckily I knew what I knew enough to get the work done. Like I said, a lot of the work I could do myself, but realized pretty quickly that me having hands-on tool was, that's one dimensional, right? I hang drywall all day. All I did was hang drywall. I have somebody else doing that, and I go meet with somebody. And I had a lunch the other day with two guys, and between the two of them, they're going to put in about $150,000. That's what I need to be doing, right? And that was a pretty big mind shift for me to have, where I was so used to doing it all on my own, and just being a fireman, right? We always, that's kind of like our mantra. If you know a fireman, that's we're all pretty much the same. Just depends on what part of the country you are, as far as the mindset. So I had to switch out of that and just let the guys that know what they're doing do it, and just pay them and move on.
Yeah. How are you meeting? Out of interest, how are you meeting investors now? Is it through work?
No, so I meet them, like, networking on the internet. These guys are local, and I met them word of mouth through somebody else that knows what we're doing, and they're like, man, so and so is really wanting to get into multifamily, and they might have 4, 5, 6 houses, but the one gentleman I just met with, he was like, man, it's just running me ragged. I thought it'd be great, but I'm missing the time with my family. They're calling me all the time for all this stuff, and then he doesn't have enough spread in his capital, what he's getting on his profits to pay contractors. So he finds himself over there doing the work, and maybe doesn't look as great, but he's like, he finally just gets frustrated, and it is what it is. I'm walking away, and so he was really interested when we started talking, when we probably had 2 or 3 lunches. And then he just started selling property. I mean, I was like, whoa, you're getting serious, and he's like, oh, I'm serious, man. I want to get on these deals. And, you really just lit a fire, and I can really see, the best way for me to get there is to be in multifamily. And so, like he said, that he's like kind of where I was, where he doesn't have enough money to go buy a big deal on his own, and he doesn't have the knowledge, but he's like, look, I'll put in money with you. And it's kind of like I tell those guys, I don't have enough time in the day to meet with everybody and anybody, but if you get in on one of our deals, well, then, then you kind of reserve a seat. You call me and say, hey, I want to meet to know how the property's going. Well, hey, come on down. That's not like, I don't offer that to everybody. And then, like I said, I'm trying to balance my own. I'm still a fireman at the moment. We'll see, in the next couple of years if that happens. But if I leave the fire service like Jack did, but that's kind of how I meet them, just word of mouth. And I don't, we talked about that earlier. It's kind of like it's out of my comfort zone to be putting content out, or to talking. Even doing a podcast is tough for me, because at what point do you feel like enough to talk to people or teach people? There's no real line for that. And there's plenty of people out there that don't really know anything, or don't have a ton of experience, and they'll be the first one to tell you, hey, here's how you should do it. And that can get a lot of people in trouble. I had a friend of mine that listened to a guy like that, and he lost $30,000 on a flip. He bought a house in a bad area, well, in a decent area, but he overdid it, right? Granite and stainless steel and all these awesome fixtures, and then he couldn't sell it. And so when he finally dropped it down to a price where it would sell, he lost a bunch of money, and you don't want that either. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, cool, man. Cool story, cool everything, right? I love everything that you have going on. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I like to incorporate some wrestling-related real estate questions.
Yeah.
The first one is, what would your wrestling name be? If you picked a wrestling name for yourself, what would that be?
Maybe I'd say Bigfoot, right? Because I'm 6'7". The Giant's already taken, so I'm going Bigfoot. I got 15. My shoes are 15, so.
Okay, I'm one size. I'm 16 and a little bit.
Are you really?
Yeah.
How much you got me there?
Not to get shoes, especially growing up. I'm sure you were similar to me. It was a pain.
Oh yeah, I was like, my mom would just get on the internet, or go into well, back then they didn't have the internet really, but I mean, go back into the shoe store and just be like, what do you have in this size, if anything? And that was it.
Yeah.
And we would go to anywhere, just keep going around until you found somebody that had it. That's what you were wearing.
Yeah. Yeah. Finally, I found someone who feels my pain.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Every wrestler has a special move, right? It's their biggest strength. What is your special move in real estate?
I would. I don't know. That's kind of hard. I would. If I had to pick one, I would probably say networking. I feel like, I've just had people. People tell me that a lot of times, and you'll hear it too, where like it's not necessarily the deal, right? It's the person that people are investing in. And I feel like I can really kind of communicate that when I sit down and talk with people, that, I love it. I'm excited. It's like the only thing, I've been a fireman my whole career. It's the only thing that's ever made me think, I could leave the fire service and do this full time. I love all of it. It's like hunting to me, right? I mean, I love the tracking down the deals, negotiating, doing the deals, working through it, knowing that this big upside's coming, and then what it's going to look like 10 years from now when we sell off stuff or, whatnot. And so I think that's probably the networking is good because I can sell it really good to people. And like I said, they believe in me, I guess, once we're done talking. So,
Yeah.
or we meet,
Yeah. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken then?
Oh, the biggest body slam. I'll tell you. So this one's kind of embarrassing, but I found 10 other people. So again, it's not a lot of money, but it was a big slap in the face to know that, hey, it can go that easy. So I had a guy that went to a bunch of local meetups, was legitimate, came off as a legitimate guy, was a wholesaler, flipper, hung around some pretty heavy hitter circles within our local meetup here in Columbus, and held a couple conferences. So I thought, man, this guy's, he's a legit guy, right? Well, he had asked if I would he was doing a flip, and he needed $2,500 to kind of get it over the finish line, and it was only like 30 days. I'll pay you. He was going to double the money. Which again, if you've ever been in a situation where you need working capital, if you give me 20 grand and I tell you I'm going to give you 30 at the end, right? I'm going to pay you 10,000, right? So you're making a great return. If I need that money that bad at that moment to get what I need done but I know at the refi, right, I'm going to make, or I'm going to be able to pull out all this money. It's not that big of a deal. And in real estate, it's the only thing that you'd ever hear somebody say that's not that big of,
Yeah.
That's they always cracks me up. Guys will talk about hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, like it's no big deal, but only in real estate. But anyway, so I borrowed the guy the money, and then 30 days came and went. He never paid me back. Then he was kind of ghosting me, gave me some BS story, and still never got my money back. And then I found out after the fact that there was like 9 or 10 other people that he got for like a total of like $75,000, right? So again, it's not a lot of money, but I always wanted to, I see these other guys that are doing private lending, and I'm like, that's great returns, right? They're getting crazy interest, and again, it just got me. I thought, oh, I'm going to give this guy $2,500. He's giving me back 5,000 in a month. I could use that money on what I'm doing, right? So that'll be great. And so I still don't have the money back. We've done some, now that the amount of lawsuits have grown, and the attorney general's office has picked it up, and eventually he may or may not get charged, and I doubt I'll ever see any of my money, right? But lesson learned.
Yeah.
So I almost want to thank him for teaching me that lesson, and I'm glad I didn't. There's some guys that I've met with that gave him like 10, 20 grand. So luckily I wasn't out that kind of money. My wife would have probably killed me. But I learned a lot. Again, I'd never done lending. I should have called some guys that I know that do lending and said, hey, what should I do? Does this sound good? Because he sent me over again, same kind of contract that I use. We spelled out all the details, gave the address of the property. I mean, if you went to court, it's like plain as day, he's guilty, right? Why would you ever set yourself up for that? It's not like we did a handshake and a verbal agreement. I mean, I have all kinds of legal documents, but that was it. Money was gone. So, that was a big lesson, just to make me realize just how quickly, I can make one bad decision and, gone all kinds of money. So.
Yeah. Well, that's just so dumb on his behalf, right? Because he was doing all the right things, right? He was networking. He was.
Oh yeah,
summit and all that stuff, right? He could have used that for good, right?
Yeah, and I even called mutual friends we had. I'm like, hey, this guy better than I do, and they're like, oh yeah, he's great, man. He's good. He's a good guy. Okay. And then that was it. I mean, so, I don't know. I haven't talked to him a whole lot. He's tried to communicate with my attorneys like, hey, only in writing and don't be having phone conversation, so I'm like, I'm not worried about it at this point. Like I said, it was worth, if the lesson I learned cost me $2,500, I mean, that's cheaper than a mastermind. Right. And so, it was, like I said, it's money well spent at this point in time. And it honestly, the funny part is I've met 2 of the guys out of the 10, and they are like, they want to invest again, but with me into a real deal. So, like I said, where's the silver lining at? It brought me into contact with a couple of guys I never would have met. So
yeah, actually kind of worked out to some extent, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, that's like I said, that was the biggest one, right? It just showed me that you can easily get knocked down the minute you think you feel like you're oh, I know what I'm doing, or you know everything or whatever. I mean, definitely don't feel that way, but you can get that kind of mindset if you have a bunch of 4, 5, 6 successes without any kind of knockdown. You kind of get like, oh, I'll just pick up and repeat the same thing I did over here on this apartment complex on this one, And that's where guys, I think, really can get themselves in trouble, where you really don't evaluate each deal as its own independent thing. You can get yourself in trouble. So
Yeah, yeah. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I had mentioned this to you earlier before we were on, but the probably the biggest thing for me is putting myself out there, right? I mean, I've always been kind of a shy guy when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I think just the demeanor, like I said, guys in the fire service, most guys, the guys that I hang around, most guys, if I go somewhere, there's a room of 50 firemen that I gravitate to, are guys that, they might be like the most experienced guys in the room, but they're not the guys up telling stories and talking about stuff. Like, you'd never even know that, that guy's done all these cool things and saved, I've been in all these crazy situations, because he doesn't need to talk about it. Right. I mean, that's just kind of the way things are. And so, over the last year, I've watched a lot of guys that I knew that have really grown their network and have gotten brought in on some pretty massive deals, because they didn't necessarily know people, but people knew them through them doing podcasts, them putting out content every day, and it's always, part of it's been embarrassing for me, like thinking like I don't know enough to tell people anything. There's guys that are killing it, that are doing way bigger things than I am. Like, who am I? That should be the guy that's, giving pointers, right, or helping people or whatnot. And so, doing stuff like this is probably the biggest. It's like a fear, right? You get to the edge of that cliff, like you said, you're on the top rope, and you got to jump, and that guy's outside the ring, right? So the fall just got a lot bigger. That it makes it a lot more nervous. So that's kind of this is a big first step towards putting stuff out like that this year 2021. So
yeah, well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you made the jump, and I told you beforehand, right, man? You've done way, like, it's good to compare yourself to people doing more deals, right? But in reality as well, right, you've done phenomenal, right? To not only to be at 90 units, but to have 325 in the contract, and to go full cycle on 50 units, and to pull out $750,000 in refi money, right? It's pretty amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing what you've done.
When you say it like that, it sounds like, oh, maybe I want to meet that guy, right?
Exactly.
When you're living in it, I don't. It's yeah. So no, yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, like I said, it's been great. I'm glad we connected, and like I said, it's hopefully this is the not the last time we chat. So
for sure, no, yeah, absolutely. Let's keep in touch for sure. But before we kind of end this conversation, which has been a really good one, I really enjoyed it, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you? How can they get in touch with you? How can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook. It's just Seth Teagle, right? Pretty easy. Probably have to search Columbus, Ohio, to find me. The other one is our group. So it's Greenlight Capital, based out of Utah. Our website is glequitygroup.com. And you can call my cell phone. I can give you that, or you can put in the show notes afterwards or whatever. Yeah. And I love to, like I said, I love to connect with anybody, and I love trying to help people. And if but I'm definitely, like I said, I don't know everything, but what I do know, I'll try to help anybody achieve whatever they want. So
awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing everything that you have today. It's been a lot of help for a lot of people, I think, and really interesting, and I've learned stuff just listening to you, man. So I really appreciate that. Have an awesome rest of your day, and Happy New Year, man. It's New Year's.
Me too.
It's the 30th for people who are listening now. It's December 30th. So Happy New Year, man.
Yeah, absolutely. You too. Thank you.